Greetings, nerds. Let's explain how to read these tubes here. Tubes, bottles, whatever. Now, most of these professional brands are going to list their pigment code. Actually, technically speaking, all of them will, except for one or two, maybe. But the vast majority of them will. So, with pigment, we can tell what this blend is right here. PO73, that's Pyro Orange Opaque, because PO71 is the transparent one. And then you have PR112, that's Naphthol Red Light or Naphthol AS. Then PW6, which is Titanium White. Series is how expensive the paint is. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant and explain what series actually means at the end of this video. Because it's kind of a long-winded thing. These squares right here are really important to know for mini painters. So I'll get into that in a moment here. But this right there, that's also kind of important to know, but most mini painters don't care. Most hobby people don't care in general, novice artists, stuff like that. That sun symbol is ASTM Lightfastness. So what Lightfastness is, it's the metric on how quickly something fades in UV light. For instance, a fluorescent, I have a bunch of videos on fluorescents now, or, well, not a bunch, but two, where, you know, I talk about the fading in one of them. I show the fading, at least in one of them, which, after a course of a week, it darkened, the fluorescent violet darkened up after about a week of sun exposure, which is annoying, and that's not something that most artists want. That means these are not archival if there are 5. Now, there's 2 different things, and some paint companies will do it differently. With that, you have the STM, which is 5:1, 5 being the worst, 1 being the best. Then you have the blue wool scale, which is the more traditional one. Blue wool scale, 8 is the best and 1 is the worst. Which is of those is better? They're about the same. Blue wool is a little bit more accurate when it comes to it. Like a 7 is, it will tell you like that's a 7, while an ASTM will cover both 7 and 8 on a blue wool scale. So it's a little bit more accurate, but as I said, they're about the same. And a blue wool scale 7 can still last 50 plus years in a museum without a problem. In a museum setting, because those are controlled and light is controlled and everything like that. They're behind glass, they have varnishes on them that protect that. So yeah, there's a lot that blue wool scale will make you think, but as I said, they're about the same. Now the squares, however, that's what mini painters want to know. Specifically mini painters. So a full black square is opaque. This will tell you its opacity. Half black, half white is semi-opaque. A split white like that, white and white split square, that is going to be a semi-transparent, and then a full white is transparent. The difference between semi-transparent and transparent are a little bit nuanced, but it more has to do with like glazes and whatnot. The more transparent a pigment is, the better it glazes. So if you're trying to find something that glazes really well, and there's similar colors, the more transparent one is going to be better for that purpose. While something more opaque is going to glaze worse. So that's a little bit important to know, but that's for a different tutorial when we go into that in great detail. Now, different companies will do different things. For instance, this is Holbein right here. Holbein, pretty decent product, but they do a really weird permanency rating thing where they only have 4 dots versus everyone else who's using 5 or 8. Some companies will do a 3-dot system, and those companies will do really stupid things like Daler-Rowney will list their fluorescence as a 2-dot, which means that there's no 1 dot. Meaning there's only 2 rankings of it. And that doesn't give you a very good idea of how light fast it is. When you see a 3-dot system, never trust it. When you see a 4-dot system, that gets a little bit weird and annoying because both of these are an ASTM1. But they're listing this as a 3 and listing that as a 4. So you have to wonder what their permanency rating is. Now with their opacity rating, this gets a little bit weird. We have to understand the Japanese language reads like that, not like that. So left to right instead of right to left. I believe the Japanese language reads like that, at least. Or that's how they write manga. Whatever. I don't read Japanese. I don't know look at Japanese. Except Oni-chan. Ugh. That word is forever corrupted in my head. So the opacity rating on here, this will be the opaque right here. And that will be semi-transparent. On specifically Hobian. And that took a while to figure out, actually. Because normally you would think that putting it over here, because this one right here means they're a permanency rating. If 4 meaning the best. But no, this is an opaque pigment, and you can tell by how it works and how it blocks the black. While this one, this is up there, that doesn't block black at all. Like, what? Yeah, so annoying. Now, Michael Harding, they do it a little bit differently as well. So theirs is going to be in writing. So they have their pigment, organic, inorganic, oil content, high, very low. So this has more pigment in here than this one does. Light fastness, very good, and light fastness, excellent. So that's going to tell you their light fastness. However, I don't like when people use words because that means that they're using some of their own obscure metric thing, or they're not using a certified standard for a metric. And then they also have their tint power on here, so very high and low for the lemon yellow. Which I like when a company lists their tint strength. Oh, right, yeah, transparent, opaque. So this is an opaque paint right here. That's a transparent, which is true. So they have it in words, which honestly, unlike the light fastness using words, when they just list it as a transparent, I kind of prefer that. And that transparency stuff gets a little bit more confusing because of companies like Gira who have 8 pips for their opacity rating. You have opaque, semi-opaque, semi-transparent, and like multiple different versions of semi-transparent and things in between, like the ML right here. Like medium to low, which is a semi-transparent. And then you have transparent and very transparent, very opaque, opaque, semi-opaque, whatever. Yeah, so Gira's probably the only company that does that one, but, you know, something to keep in mind if you ever do a Gira order. But yeah, so series number, let's talk about that real quick. So series number, most people are going to say that's that's the price of the pigment. Well, not exactly. It is and it isn't. Part of it is the price of the pigment. Part of it is how expensive that paint is. You can find blends where the blend has pigments in there that are all series 1, and that blend will be a series 3. Because that blend is hard to produce or something like that. Or it's low volume, so they want to make a little bit of extra money on it. Like, it's a low selling, so, you know, you make $1 or $2 extra on it because of that. So, that nature. Which makes perfect sense to me. That happens. It's called capitalism. Now, there's a couple other things to that, like how much pigment they're actually using. For instance, bismuth is a very expensive pigment. It's one of the more expensive pigments on the market. This is a Series 9, so this 4-ounce, 118 ml bottle is going to cost me $30-something. While a 2-ounce, which is the smaller size of that, the 2-ounce is going to cost me about $21 or so. With Schmenke, it's about the same price for the 2-ounce thing, making this a little bit cheaper, but they're about the same price, right? Well, before this was on sale. This was on sale for like 50% off because they're rebranding. But when we get over to Old Holland here, these are two different tubes. These two are the same size tube. They are both 60 ml tubes. This tube is way heavier. Like, you can feel the weight difference here. This one was $14. This one was $21 or so. $25 maybe. I don't remember the exact price. I paid like $14 for it, though. This is, yeah. So, that's another thing about series, is that sometimes it's indicative of how much pigment is in there. Because they're using so little pigment in this Old Holland here, this Old Holland is terrible. It doesn't have the same opacity. It's very transparent for a bismuth. Very transparent. And it doesn't cover very well. It doesn't work very well as a paint. It just doesn't thin very well either. While this thins just like Golden's heavy bodied acrylics do, when it comes to bismuth at least. They're very similar. And yeah, this one just has way higher pigment than Old Holland. Old Holland acrylics are drastically underpigmented, and they're terrible. They're awful paint. And you can tell by the price. Except you can't, because Old Holland is naturally insanely expensive for what you get. But with their acrylics, this give me a really wide eye, or really open mind to, or whatever the term is, to how series worked. Because this is a lower series than this one is. Though they don't list their series on here at all, or anything other than what pigment is in here. Because Old Holland is an annoying company. And terrible at everything they do. I don't remember where I was going with this. I just kind of want to insult the Old Holland in a video. Yeah. Anyways, that's about it. Thanks for staying till the end and listening to my rant about Old Holland and series, because series is confusing, and it confuses me even to this day, because you can rarely ever trust it for how expensive a pigment is. And yeah, sometimes it is indicative to how expensive the pigment is, but it's also indicative to, as I said, how much pigment is in there. And, the cost of the pigment, stuff like that. Because once again, bismuth. This was super, super cheap for a bismuth. Super cheap. This one was not cheap at all. But it's Schmenke, and Schmenke is just very expensive in the US. This was technically cheaper than this. But this is made in the US, so I'm not paying a lot of shipping fees. Yeah, either way, they're approximately the same price, though. Per milliliter. Not really. That one's more expensive. Well, this video's gone on for too long. Anyways, there's some links in the description. Like the Discord link. Join if you have questions. If you want to see what you can do for, ask questions, and maybe it'll turn into a video. You never know. Because I always need more questions and video ideas, because I run out very quickly. Bye, I guess. Whatever.